My name is Chris Justice, and I am a co-founder and president of Atlas City Global, the creators of the Catalyst Network. And we are delighted to be here at Blockchain Live today to announce the open sourcing of the Catalyst technology. Catalyst is a full stack, enterprise class, distributed ledger, and distributed computing protocol that is very unique and first of a kind. And I want to just thank you to the Blockchain Live organizers for putting on a great event so far. So let's start from the beginning, though. Let's have a reality check here. We've been telling the world that blockchain and distributed ledger will herald a new economic era akin to the birth of the internet, with enormous implications in almost every industry. And almost, I suspect, everyone in this room believes that blockchain can be an agent of social and economic change. Yes? Who's a believer? Raise your hand. Yeah, I suspect. Anyone still haven't made up their mind? Okay, that's good. Anyone a flat denier? This is fake news? Oh, thank goodness. I don't see many of those. But anyway, we're happy to answer all those questions because I think we're all seeing really interesting potential new use cases almost every week. But let's take a look at what the technology is actually being used for today. Yes, I think we need to recognize the early successes of food provenance with Walmart and Hyperledger, and R3 with banking and payments and insurance. But the vast majority of the most used dApps globally today are what? Exchanges, gambling apps, and number 3? Anyone? Games. Now, I have no problem with any of those business models, but there's a vast gulf between the promise and the reality of blockchain and distributed ledger right now. And let's be honest, as fun as those games are, they're blockchain cuties and hypersnakes and crypto dozer. They're not going to change the world anytime soon. So, what does this tell us? It tells us that no existing public blockchain network is fit for purpose for the majority of real-world use cases and enterprise clients. And furthermore, if we look at private blockchains, you have to wonder, are they fit for purpose, considering the high cost of deployment and the ongoing costs of Hyperledger and Corda? But you know, this is not new. We've been here before. Do you remember? Raise your hand if you remember when the browser-enabled internet first emerged. Anyone remember that? Right? I was there, working in the early days of the internet media sector as the world rapidly transformed. And it was an exciting era. All of these previously disconnected and distributed islands and silos of information all over the world were suddenly connected and available instantaneously anywhere. Well, almost instantaneous, maybe. This was 56K dial-up after all, right? And everyone was frantically burning through cash just to gain market share, and almost nobody was turning a profit. Pets.com. You remember Pets.com? Annual revenues of $619,000 and an advertising budget, $11.8 million. They were selling product at 1/3 cost price in order to try to gain market share. And you know what? Wall Street loved it, didn't they? eToys.com went public at $20 a share, closed its first day of trading at 76. They loved it while it lasted. But I don't need to tell you what happened next. If the graph looks like the Swiss Alps, it's usually a sign that something went wrong. But here's the thing. Although many firms went bankrupt, others, like Amazon, went on to become one of the biggest companies on the planet. At first blush, Amazon and Pets.com were not actually that different, were they? They both sold physical goods online. They both absorbed huge losses to gain market share. So, what was the difference? The difference was that Amazon developed a business model that could successfully scale before it ran out of cash. And history has a tendency of repeating itself. The most important thing to learn, though, are the lessons from that history. So here we are again with blockchain and DLT. The promise is huge. This technology has the potential to fundamentally rewire the global economy and create the next wave of economic growth in the tech sector and beyond. But if this industry can't scale, it will be dead on arrival. Our team at Atlas City is made up of a mix of veteran entrepreneurs, researchers, software engineers. When we were establishing the company, we asked ourselves a key question. If blockchain is really going to change the world, not just sit in the corner as a technical oddity or a vehicle for speculation, what has to change? We actually started off wanting to develop distributed applications for financial services, much like the Navuras or the Globocaps or the R3s of the world. We looked into it in depth, though, and realized that DLT and blockchain networks were nowhere near where they needed to be. And if the technology was going to be viable, it needed to be scalable, accessible, and sustainable. So we went back to first principles and developed a decentralized network from the ground up that meets the needs of enterprise clients. And today, we're launching that network. It's called Catalyst, and it's a full stack of decentralized technologies capable of enabling the decentralized web while remaining completely compatible with the existing internet infrastructure today. What we ended up with was a way to make the promise of blockchain a reality. A reality where reconciliation costs go to zero, ushering in a new era of productivity increases and economic growth. But this requires Catalyst's patent-pending feature of being able to handle both confidential and public transaction information in the same ledger. It's a reality where important things like food and pharmaceuticals and waste are tracked from start to finish so we can eliminate harmful fakes from supply chains. This needs Catalyst's fully integrated distributed file system to safely track the kinds of volumes that cloud does today and smartly recognize active versus archival data. Imagine a reality where we have addressed the issue of connected devices. Gartner estimates that the number of devices connected to the internet will grow from 5 billion devices today to 55 billion devices in 3 to 5 years. The centralized web cannot cope with that. It requires decentralization. And this needs Catalyst's super efficient consensus methodology combined with the distributed file system to be able to run and turn an IoT device into a Catalyst node. Imagine a reality where presently illiquid assets are easily tradable. Infrastructure, land, real estate, and more. You've heard all of this before. But when they're tradable, they'll acquire a 20% liquidity premium, making them much more accessible and valuable as investments. But this needs the flexibility of Catalyst distributed compute and the ability to write distributed applications and smart contracts in any .NET language with applications running in containers. We just had a great presentation on medical records and healthcare. Where are all your medical records today? Anyone in this room know where they're actually stored That's a vital asset. Imagine when those are owned by you and controlled by you, and they're available where you need them, when you need them, never getting lost and easy to share. We have so far to go, don't we? But this needs Catalyst's privacy-enhancing features and the ability to write applications that can securely interact with all kinds of and types of files. Charts, X-rays, MRI scans, blood reports, operation reports. Imagine a supply chain where fruits and produce, where the value at each step of the journey from farm to store or to table is accompanied by instant payment and concurrent tracking on DLT. This needs Catalyst scalability and interoperability with payment rails and other chains. Well, Catalyst Network is the catalyst for change that will enable us to close this gap between blockchain promises and blockchain reality. And as I said, we're introducing Catalyst today, and we're inviting developers to join our early access program to start contributing. But let's briefly look at the existing limitations of blockchain and DLT today and how they're being addressed. I think we all know this pretty well, right? Slow, often not so secure at scale, complex, expensive to deploy. We architected Catalyst to address each of these issues and to be what we all need it to be to deliver on the promises of blockchain and DLT. Let's start with scalability. Sure, we have private DLTs, which are indeed scalable. However, even private Hyperledger, even though it can scale, it's complicated and still has to access external DB2 or other centralized databases to work with files. And although centralized databases are less secure than fractionalized and encrypted data stored in a decentralized database on a Catalyst distributed file system, the real struggle with the scalability issue is with public ledgers and chains. When we drew up our technical requirements, the first thing on it was scalability. And at the moment, scalability is the Achilles heel of public blockchains. If you're in any business that requires high throughput, any proof of work-based blockchain is simply not up to the job. For any of the big game-changing applications, scalability is key. And this is not just about individuals using a decentralized network to buy some crypto or breed a new digital cat. Take Industry 4.0, smart cities. Hundreds and thousands of IoT devices need to be able to share data within a short space of time. When we were developing Catalyst, we knew that to address this issue, we had to go back to first principles. And that's why Catalyst is not a fork or a tweak of any existing network or protocol. It's been designed from the very first line of code to be scalable. How do we do this? Well, we did this by designing a new consensus mechanism, neither proof of work nor proof of stake, where randomly selected nodes collaborate to collectively update the ledger state and share the rewards. This approach has a number of important advantages. First, as nodes are collaborating rather than competing to update the ledger, the protocol is far more lightweight and less hardware intensive than other consensus mechanisms. It can even run on a single board device, like a Raspberry Pi or an IoT. And because it doesn't rely on proof of work, Catalyst is far more energy efficient. At the moment, the energy required to mine physical minerals is less than to mine Bitcoin. Research shows that mining $1 worth of Bitcoin uses twice as much energy as mining the equivalent amount of gold or platinum or copper. So that is clearly not environmentally sustainable. The catalyst mechanism, on the other hand, doesn't waste processor power and electricity on solving pointless puzzles by brute force. And catalyst is lightweight, and the rewards are shared more evenly among the nodes. So there's much less chance of big mining conglomerates coming to dominate the network. More nodes means more security. And by attracting a greater number of genuinely independent nodes with the appropriate amount of storage and compute that are chosen randomly to validate transactions, Catalyst will be decentralized in a much more meaningful way and much more secure as a result. Now, I suspect there are a few questions out there about what this consensus mechanism is and how it works. So I hope for those who want to get into the weeds, you attended one of our developer dens this morning where you heard James Kirby, our head of engineering, actually talk about how it works. And he actually demonstrated a decentralized Twitter that was running on Catalyst. So let's talk about accessibility for a minute. If we're going to achieve widespread adoption, it cannot continue to be a technically specialized programming language or hardware. It needs to be easy to deploy, operate over the existing internet, and on cloud infrastructure, and work in a wide array of circumstances. In short, there needs to be as few barriers to entry as possible. And we have nothing against Solidity, but if anyone who wants to deploy a decentralized application solution needs to learn a new specialized language or one that has limited functionality, then DLT and blockchain are never going to be widely deployed. Our vision is that any developer in any firm can switch to a decentralized software solution without learning a new programming language. It's built in .NET Core, so it's cross-platform compatible, and is open to the entire .NET community from launch. That means if you can program in C#, C++, F#, Visual Basic, any of the more than 30 .NET languages, you can now develop decentralized software solutions. And Catalyst will deploy smart contracts in containers. So you can execute applications directly in container runtime environments like Docker and CoreOS RKT. And also importantly, recognizing the importance of interoperability, there will also be an Ethereum virtual machine so that any smart contracts or applications written for Ethereum are backward compatible and deployable on Catalyst. And on top of this, the KVM, or Catalyst Virtual Machine, will add additional bytecodes to enable an application to be run in the decentralized Catalyst framework, taking advantage of Catalyst's efficient consensus mechanism and its ability to work with all types of files in the Catalyst distributed file system. Sustainability. Sustainability is really important to us. And any network that has a consensus mechanism that's based on proof of work, we just don't think is going to be efficient enough. And in the current environment, anyone who has a business that needs to operate at scale needs to be environmentally sustainable. Bitcoin now consumes more electricity than the Republic of Ireland each year. In the long term, it's simply not viable that a blockchain network consume the same amount of energy as an entire country. You know, there are enough real environmental problems in the world without us introducing new ones. So we feel very strongly about that. And that's why we're not starting out with proof of work and trying to fork at a later date with all the messiness and division that creates. Rather, we're starting on day zero with a consensus mechanism that can scale sustainably. But you know, blockchain has to do much more than merely minimize harm to the environment. It has the potential to be part of the solution. And there's a growing body of evidence that shows how emerging technologies like blockchain and AI and machine learning, I think Don mentioned it this morning in the opening keynote, can be part of this circular economy that Accenture estimates is going to be worth hundreds of billions of dollars in a few years. You know, until now, our economy has been based on this linear model. Take, make, waste. Take resources out of the ground, make a product, sell it, and then people throw it away in order to make room for more product. Historically, that's the way it's worked. Companies have made more revenue from selling new products. Natural resources have been relatively plentiful until now. And so this incentivized companies to actually embrace disposable goods and planned obsolescence. But for obvious reasons, regulatory, environmental, and moral, that's take, make, waste model really is no longer viable. So the goal of the circular economy is to enable businesses to generate revenue without forcing consumers to throw stuff away. You know that studies show that the average drill is used for a total of 13 minutes in its entire lifetime. The average car is parked 95% of the time. When you look 15 or 20 years out, we're likely to have networks of autonomous, connected, electric, and shared vehicles in most major cities. And these systems are going to need multiple sources of trusted data, such as payment information, insurance data, smart recharging solutions, as well as IoT sensors that are going to measure the condition of a vehicle and register when it needs to be brought in for maintenance. So we have many sources of data, many stakeholders, and potential trust issues. These are all the perfect use cases for scalable, decentralized network. And we believe that blockchain can be the backbone of that circular economy. And so while we've built Catalyst to be applicable across almost any kind of use case, we're placing a lot of emphasis early on sustainability. And we're already tackling real environmental problems with Catalyst now. We all know plastic pollution is a huge problem. Every year, 7.7 billion plastic bottles are purchased in the UK, but only 50 to 60% of these are captured for recycling. The remainder end up in landfill, or worse, in our oceans. So Atlas City has partnered with CryptoCycle and large players in the beverage industry to develop a solution which harnesses the power of the Catalyst network. In other countries, deposit return schemes rely on expensive reverse vending machines where the consumer pays a deposit and then has to go to a particular point to get their deposit back. But that system relies on large, expensive, these reverse vending machines and relies on barcodes rather than a unique identifying code. This means two things, right? The consumers have to go to a designated recycling spot to return their bottle. And because each bottle is not uniquely identified, it's subject to cheating. And for the many consumers who just buy a drink on the go, there's no convenient option for recycling. If you buy a bottle of Coke on the high street, the nearest collection point might be kilometers away. What are you going to do? Probably just drop the bottle in a regular bin, preventing it from being properly recycled. So our partner CryptoCycle has developed something called Reward for Waste that removes this need for expensive infrastructure. And under this scheme, every bottle has a unique code that's registered on Catalyst and then tracked all the way through the value chain. When the consumer has bought their bottle, paid their deposit, they use our smartphone app, scan the bottle, tap the bin, which has got an NFC-enabled chip in it, and they immediately get their deposit back, rewarding the consumer by returning that to their virtual wallet immediately. This is provenance and track and trace at very high throughput volumes and takes advantage of three key Catalyst elements. One, the ability to do very high transaction throughput. Secondly, the ability to connect to IoT devices and validate data. And thirdly, the ability to have public and private information on the same ledger in the same application. Naturally, Coke, Pepsi, Britvic, and other suppliers need to all cooperate in one scheme to realize the most benefits. But those companies don't want to share their data with their competitors or other participants. It needs to be secured. The data that needs to be shared has to be able to be shared, but the private data has to be kept private. And that's what we built Catalyst to be able to do, to ensure that we can handle these kind of situations without complicated workarounds. So to us, that's what blockchain and DLT looks like to solve real problems. And we'll be applying this across many frameworks. Bottles, cans, medical waste, even pharmaceutical packaging, to eliminate counterfeit packaging in the supply chains. In order to make this a reality, we know that we need the developer community. And that's why we didn't want to make Catalyst a walled garden, accessible only to larger enterprises. That's why, although we've spent nearly 2 years and hundreds of thousands of pounds building this from the ground up to enable these real-world, large-scale deployments of decentralized technologies, we're putting it into a foundation so that it will be managed by the developer community. It's been a real pleasure today to launch the Catalyst Network here at Blockchain Live. We really look forward to hearing all of the potential use cases that you all feel can be deployed when you have a framework of decentralized computing that can handle real-world types of uses. I hope you had the opportunity to visit one of our workshops this morning. Please visit our booths, download our wallet, and participate in our upcoming initial exchange offering. And if you're a developer, please drop by the booth, apply to our early access program, and start contributing today. Thank you.
So we should be sexual.